This wasn't a scene from a Hollywood blockbuster. There were no dramatic soundtracks, no slow-motion hero shots, only raw, calculated destruction unfolding in real time. At precisely 3:14 a.m., deep beneath the surface of the Persian Gulf, something catastrophic erupted. An immense explosion detonated along the ocean floor, releasing an overwhelming burst of compressed energy. Within milliseconds, the blast transformed into a violent sphere of pressure, expanding outward before collapsing into a devastating underwater shockwave. That wave surged through the dark depths at nearly 1,500 meters per second, unstoppable, invisible, and deadly. Its target, a modern warship. The impact was instantaneous. Steel groaned under pressure. The hull, the very backbone of the vessel, twisted unnaturally. What had once been a rigid, engineered structure capable of surviving storms and combat now bent like a fragile spine under immense force. Then came the silence. Power systems flickered and died. Inside the ship, alarms erupted, piercing, chaotic, relentless. Emergency lights flickered on as systems failed one by one. The vessel wasn't destroyed, but it was wounded. Critically, from the attacker's perspective, the mission appeared successful. They believed they had crippled a major naval asset, possibly even sinking it. But they were wrong. What they had actually done was far more dangerous. They had triggered something far bigger. A chain reaction. A hidden system. A response designed not just to retaliate, but to annihilate. Operation-level protocols activated instantly. What followed was not retaliation. It was execution. The Persian Gulf, already one of the most geopolitically volatile regions in the world, had now become a digital battlefield, a pressure cooker on the edge of eruption. At the center of this invisible war stood a massive offshore oil structure. But this wasn't just an oil rig anymore. It had been transformed, reinforced, upgraded into something far more strategic. It now functioned as a high-level command node, AC-4ISR hub, a brain. From this platform, coordinated operations were being conducted. Drone swarms, coastal missile batteries, surveillance systems, all synchronized to control the battlespace. As long as this node remained active, the entire defensive network would remain intact, which meant one thing. It had to be eliminated. At 3:20 a.m., 50 nautical miles away, something moved silently through the depths. A submarine. Advanced. Undetectable. Patient. Instead of launching a traditional torpedo, it deployed something far more precise. A specialized unmanned underwater vehicle. This wasn't brute force. This was surgical warfare. The drone descended toward the seabed, scanning, calculating, navigating with absolute precision. It wasn't hunting ships. It was hunting infrastructure. Moments later, it found its target. A fiber optic cable. Thin, fragile, but critical. This single connection carried the entire data flow between the offshore command hub and mainland control centers. Without it, the system would go blind. The drone didn't hesitate. One decisive action. The cable was severed. Instantly, the command hub was cut off, isolated from all external coordination. No signals, no communication, no awareness. It was still physically intact. But digitally, it no longer existed. Back on the surface, the damaged warship began to stir. Despite structural damage and failing systems, it wasn't out of the fight. Not even close. At the exact moment its onboard systems faltered, a secondary layer activated. One that didn't rely on the ship itself. Above the Earth, in low orbit, a network of satellites detected the emergency signal. Within seconds, they established a direct link, a space-based data bridge. Even without fully operational onboard radar, the ship could now access targeting data from orbit. This meant one thing: it could still fight, even while damaged, even while blind. But instead of retreating or going silent, the ship's commander made an unexpected decision, a risky one. The radar system remained active, weak, intermittent, almost like a dying signal. To enemy sensors, it appeared as though the ship was struggling, barely functional, vulnerable, exposed. But that was the illusion. This wasn't weakness. It was bait, a carefully crafted deception designed to provoke a response, a digital lure. And it worked. Miles away, enemy forces detected the signal. To them, it was an opportunity, a wounded target, easy prey. They mobilized immediately. What followed was overwhelming. Hundreds of autonomous attack drones surged forward, accompanied by unmanned explosive vessels. These weren't high-value units, but that was the point. They were cheap, numerous, and overwhelming. Their objective wasn't precision. It was saturation, to flood the battlefield with noise, confusion, and chaos. And within that chaos, hide the real threat. As the swarm approached the sky, or rather, The radar space became cluttered. Dozens, then hundreds of signatures. Small, erratic, difficult to track. The system was being overwhelmed. Buried within that storm, something far more dangerous moved silently. A low-flying anti-ship missile. Fast, precise. Using the swarm as cover, it slipped through undetected, its path masked by the chaos surrounding it. For a brief moment, it looked like the strategy had worked. The ship appeared blind, overwhelmed, defenseless. But then something changed. Control shifted, not to a human, but to a system, an advanced combat algorithm. Within a fraction of a second, the battlefield was analyzed, not as chaos, but as data, patterns, movements, thermal signatures, flight behaviors. Every object was scanned, compared, and categorized. The noise was stripped away, the false targets ignored, and suddenly, the real threat stood alone, identified, locked. The response was immediate. Launch systems activated. Missiles fired in rapid succession, not randomly, but with machine-level precision. Defensive interceptors tore through the swarm, eliminating wave after wave of incoming drones. The sky cleared. The chaos collapsed. And then, the hidden missile, intercepted mid-flight, destroyed before it could even reach striking distance. The first wave had failed, completely. But this was only the beginning, because the next phase wouldn't rely on numbers. It would rely on speed and power. Something far more dangerous was already on its way. The battlefield didn't go quiet. It evolved. At 4:03 a.m., the conflict escalated beyond conventional limits. What had begun as a test of firepower was now transforming into something far more dangerous, a clash of speed, intelligence, and unseen control. The next weapon wasn't coming slowly. It was coming fast. Too fast. High above the surface, two hypersonic missiles ignited almost simultaneously. They didn't roar like traditional weapons. They sliced through the air. At speeds exceeding Mach 3, they became nearly impossible to track using conventional radar. Their trajectory wasn't just fast. It was calculated, precise, deadly. But this wasn't a simple double strike. It was a layered attack. The first missile wasn't designed to destroy. It was designed to blind. As it climbed higher into the atmosphere, the missile detonated prematurely, far above its intended target. The explosion didn't create fire. It created silence. A sudden electromagnetic pulse rippled across the sky, distorting signals, disrupting sensors, and corrupting electronic systems in its radius. For a brief moment, the battlefield went dark. Below, the warship's system struggled. Sensors flickered. Tracking systems lost coherence. Data streams fragmented into static. And in that exact window, the second missile descended. Faster, lower, hidden within the blind spot created by the first strike. This was the real weapon, the Predator. And now it was closing in. From the ship's perspective, there was nothing. No signal, no warning, no visible threat, just empty space. But the danger was already there, seconds away. Except, the ship was never truly alone. 30,000 feet above the battlefield, something else was watching. Silent, stealthy, patient. A fifth-generation fighter aircraft hovered at the edge of detection, its presence almost non-existent to enemy systems. It wasn't engaging. It was observing, tracking, calculating, and relaying. Using a secure, nearly unbreakable data link, the aircraft transmitted real-time targeting data across the network. The information bypassed traditional limitations. It didn't rely on the damaged ship sensors. It didn't need radar visibility. Instead, it created something new. A shared vision. A distributed awareness. Far away. A command platform processed that data instantly. Trajectory. Speed. Impact prediction. Everything calculated in milliseconds. And then, the solution was sent back. On board the warship, a launch command executed. But this time it was different. The missile that fired had no direct target lock, no onboard tracking, no visual confirmation. It was launched into darkness, guided not by what the ship could see, but by what another system knew. This was warfare at its highest level, not reaction, but coordination. Mid-flight, the interceptor adjusted its course, continuously receiving updates from the remote sensor platform. Every second mattered, every correction counted. And then contact. The interception occurred far beyond the ship's visible range. High in the atmosphere. A direct collision. The hypersonic threat was destroyed before it ever entered terminal range. The invisible attack. Neutralized by an equally invisible defense. This wasn't just a victory. It was a demonstration. A shift in how wars were fought. Because now, seeing wasn't required. But the enemy wasn't finished. Not even close. At 4:20 a.m., the battlefield changed again. This time, there would be no missiles, no radar signals, no communication links, only autonomy. Hundreds of drones activated simultaneously. But something was different. They weren't receiving commands. They weren't transmitting signals. They had gone dark. Each unit switched to an internal navigation system, guided entirely by pre-programmed intelligence. No radio, no external control, no way to jam. This was the next evolution. A swarm that couldn't be disrupted. A force that didn't need orders. Traditional countermeasures failed instantly. There were no frequencies to intercept, no signals to block, no commands to override. The swarm moved as a single entity, silent, independent, relentless. And then a new threat emerged. Not physical, but electronic. Enemy systems began tracking emissions from friendly assets, attempting to reverse locate their positions using their own signals. It was a dangerous tactic. Turn the opponent's strength into a weakness. But above it all, another system was already preparing its response. An electronic warfare aircraft entered the zone, not armed with missiles, not carrying bombs, but equipped with something far more powerful. Access. At 4:25 a.m., it initiated a high-risk maneuver. Not an attack, an infiltration. Using advanced signal manipulation, it injected a self-replicating digital payload directly into the swarm's onboard systems. Not through communication channels, but through their own perception systems. Their eyes. In microseconds, the code spread. Not damaging, not destructive, but transformative. It rewrote what the drones saw. The ocean surface became a target. A high-value warship. The actual ship disappeared, replaced with empty space. The swarm didn't malfunction. It adapted, based on false reality. And then chaos. Drones began diving aggressively toward the water, targeting reflections, chasing illusions, colliding midair, exploding on impact. Within moments, the entire swarm collapsed. Not destroyed by weapons, but by deception. No missiles fired, no bullets exchanged. Just a complete rewrite of reality. By 4:32 a.m., the threat was gone, erased, by code. But the battle wasn't over yet, because now the final phase began. Enemy surface vessels regrouped, not for attack, but for survival. They moved into dense civilian traffic, hiding among massive oil tankers, blending into neutral formations, using human shields, creating confusion, blurring identification. To make matters worse, they deployed signal interference, flooding the radar environment with false returns. Everything looked the same. Friend, foe, neutral, indistinguishable. But above them, a different kind of hunter was approaching. Stealth aircraft entered the zone. Silent, invisible, each carrying long-range precision weapons designed not to rely on GPS or radar, because both were compromised. At the same time, deep below the ocean surface, another action unfolded. A submarine launched a separate strike, not at ships, but at defensive systems on land. Air defense units, radar installations. The goal wasn't destruction, it was distraction. Enemy systems shifted focus, creating a gap, a window, and through that window, the real attack slipped in. The incoming weapons weren't acting alone. They communicated, shared data, adjusted targets. Like a coordinated pack, they analyzed shapes, heat signatures, movement patterns, comparing everything against an internal database. And then they chose, ignoring civilian vessels, locking only onto hostile targets. The strike was flawless, synchronized, calculated. First impact, upper structures destroyed, communication disabled, sensors gone. Second impact, internal systems breached, critical damage. Third, a vertical strike, penetration, detonation inside. The flagship didn't sink immediately. It collapsed. From within, no warning, no alarms, no chance to respond. Within seconds, it was over. By 5 a.m., the battlefield was no longer a battlefield. It was debris, heat signatures, silence. But one final threat emerged. A fast-moving vessel, damaged, desperate, charging forward. It fired blindly, unguided. Last attempt. The response was immediate. A turret adjusted, locked, and then no sound, no explosion, just light. A concentrated energy beam engaged. Within seconds, the target's weapon system overheated. Structural failure. Internal ignition. The vessel destroyed itself. The final threat gone. And then, something even more chilling. A scenario without weapons. Without explosions. Without visible conflict. A system compromised. Internally. Cooling systems locked. Heat rising. Pressure building. Until self-destruction. No missiles. No strikes. Just a command. Executed remotely. By 5:05 a.m. It was over. Completely. This wasn't just a battle. It was a preview. Because in this new era, war isn't won by firepower. It's won by control. And sometimes, the most devastating weapon is invisible.